my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is kind of a frigid Friday, and for today's video I have a thrift flip for you guys. I grabbed a few more items out of my stash and gave them all makeovers for today's video. I hope you like them, and without further ado, let's get to today's projects. My first project is a set of pillar holders that have been in my stash for a little while. Now I kind of hemmed and hawed over what color I wanted to paint them, and I ended up deciding to go ahead and try the DIY cottage color called Americauna on these. The only reason I was a little nervous is because these have a super slick finish to them, and I was worried about the adhesion of the cottage color, but honestly it did a really good job. I let it dry thoroughly in between coats. I did need 3 coats of paint just because these colors tend to be a little more thin than their thicker cousins. But I thought the coverage was great, and the self-leveling effect of this paint is just something else, you guys. It almost looks like I sprayed them rather than brushed the paint on. Now, they do have a built-in sealer, so waxing them is absolutely not necessary, but I like to give my pieces either a little bit of distressing or some sort of a patina, and in this case, I'm just using some DIY's dark wax. It doesn't make a huge difference. You can see here, I'm going to hold them together. The difference is very subtle. The left one has the dark wax, the right one does not. And I do thin my dark wax just a little bit with some mineral spirits so that it goes on pretty thin, not too thick and clumpy. And then I just very gently wipe back the excess with a shop towel, just kind of doing like a feather light touch. Now, the reason I chose not to distress these is I did just watch a Jamie Ray video, and she said the best sandpaper to use on these cottage colors for distressing is a very high grit, like a 320, and I don't have any of those. She said otherwise you risk having kind of a scratchy look to your distressed areas, and I didn't want that. Anyway, once I was done with the dark wax, these are finished, and I absolutely love how they came out. Project 2 is this cute wooden pedestal bowl that my husband and I picked up not too terribly long ago. There's a Goodwill on our way home, and so occasionally we'll just pop in there and see if they have anything. And we had run in one evening after work, and this was all that I found was this one little pedestal bowl. So I grabbed it out of my stash, and I am giving it 2 good coats of DIY's color called Prairie Grey. I don't use this color often, but it is a very beautiful kind of pewtery gray brown. It's a great neutral and a little darker than faded burlap, which is nice. Once I'd finished giving this 2 good coats of the Prairie Grey paint, I moved on to distressing my piece. I wanted to bring back some of that absolutely gorgeous dark wood color from underneath this paint and really highlight some of the details in this piece. And I understand some of you don't really care for distressing, which is fine. You could absolutely skip this step. It would have been just fine without it. I, however, do really like the distressing, so I'm going ahead and distressing it. I also cleaned off the sides really well. I was going to be putting a transfer on, and one thing I've noticed is when you're putting a transfer directly on the clay-based paint, sometimes it helps if you wash it down really well, before you apply your transfer. And then of course, let your paint dry completely again before you try and apply your transfer. For these, I am using more pieces of the one I used last week on that little shelf. This is called Painted Florals. It's by Redesign with Prima. I absolutely love this set. There are so many beautiful little flowers in it. And so I'm just taking these ivory colored flowers, cutting them into two, and then I'm using the bigger ones across from each other and the smaller ones across from each other, and then just laying those down onto the sides and using my transfer stick to apply them. Then I grabbed a larger flower with a little more color for the bottom of the bowl, and I just used the transfer stick to rub that down and applied it, pulling that vellum sheet back as I went, and then added just a little bit more of that ivory floral. Once I was done applying my transfers and I had them really well burnished in, and by burnished, I mean taking a piece of that vellum and just rubbing them really well into the paint so that you make sure you don't have any bubbles or lifted areas, I moved on to sealing my paint. Now, as I've said before, DIY paint is clay-based, and it is porous and can be reactivated with water, so you definitely want to seal your paint. For this, I'm using DIY's clear wax, and I am just applying that with my soft bristle brush in a thin layer, and then wiping back the excess with a shop towel. And then I'm going over it with DIY's dark wax. And this is just to add, again, a little bit of richness to the beautiful color that this is, and bring out some more of that beautiful detail in this piece. Once I'm done with that, I again just wipe the excess back with a shop towel, and then this piece is finished. And you guys, I absolutely love how it came out. Project 3 is another little plaque that I found in my garage. Now, you guys have heard me talk about my stash here in my kitchen, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, I also have a stash at home in my husband's garage that I am slowly trying to work through as well. So I grabbed this little piece. It looked like it had some sort of a raised design or detail on the front that somebody had chipped off, and so it was really, really rough. So I took it outside and sanded it smooth and then washed it up really well. And I already knew I wanted to decoupage the front of this, so I am grabbing DIY's Crinoline and trying to be as careful as possible and just stick to painting the very front of this and my thumb with one coat of DIY's Crinoline. So once I get the paint on there and it's completely dry, I grab out my decoupage paper. This one's called Spring Masterboard. It's one of the beautiful new ones by Roycycled. Once I'd played with it for just a minute, I decided on this really cute little image of a bird and a nest with eggs in it. So I cut it out. I spritzed the back of it with just a little bit of water, set it aside, and then I'm using clear liquid patina by DIY, and I'm just carefully laying down a little strip of that along one side of the board, nice and smooth, and then laying my paper down over it very carefully, and then just kind of rubbing it in with my hands. And then I laid down the other portion of the liquid patina and used my paintbrush and my fingers to just smooth that out, making sure I didn't have any wrinkles. And then I went over the entire thing with another coat of the liquid patina. Once I'd set that aside and it was completely dry, I grabbed my little plaque again and some 150 grit sandpaper, and I'm just using that in kind of a downward sweeping motion to take off any excess paper. Now, I think I've stated before that one of the keys here is to make sure that your paper is completely dry before you attempt this step, because if you try to do this over wet paper, you will end up tearing your image, which I've done and is not very fun. Then it was time to paint the sides of this little plaque. And for that, I chose DIY's little black dress. I wanted to kind of highlight the black accents in the bird. And I thought this was a really great color to frame that image in. Once my paint was completely dry, I grabbed a little bit of sandpaper and did some light distressing around the edges, and then it was time to seal my paint. And for that, again, I'm using DIY's clear wax. So I'm just giving this all over one good coat of the clear wax, wiping back the excess with a shop towel. And what you won't see is that I did also paint the back of this once I was finished. I just didn't get any video of that. Anyway, once I was done with the clear wax, I went in with some dark, just kind of around the edges and the sides of the paper. And then I did also do the wood portion, and I just kind of dabbed the dark wax back. Wanted to leave a little bit to give that kind of patinaed, aged appearance. I love how this turned out. I hope you guys do too. My fourth and final project is this vintage wall plaque that I picked up a while ago. This thing wasn't horrible, you guys, but it definitely gave me shag carpet and paneled wall vibes, and I wanted to kind of bring it into a more modern era, give it a little bit more modern look. I did Google Lens it before I started painting to make sure it wasn't worth anything, and so since it wasn't, at least not anything major, I went ahead with my plan. And in all honesty, when I first started, I really didn't have a really set plan. I had an idea in my head and I was just kind of going with it. And so I started by giving it a coat of the Rust-Oleum dark brown paint. Once that was completely dry, I'm going over it with 2 coats of Prairie Grey, which is this beautiful kind of darker neutral by DIY. I already had this out and I thought it would be a perfect fit for the idea that I kind of had brewing around in my head. So I gave this 2 coats of the Prairie Grey. It took a while, honestly, because of all of the detail in this piece and the depth of it. Trying to get the paintbrush kind of jammed down in some of the little holes was a lot of fun. And once it was done and dry again, I started in with DIY's Crinoline. And I am using a chip brush for this, and I am dry brushing the paint on. I wanted to have kind of a two-tone effect where it had a lot of depth and dimension to this piece. And so that is why I decided to go ahead and try dry brushing it. Now, if you aren't familiar with dry brushing or you've never tried it yourself, it's simply a technique where you dip the very tip of your brush into the paint and then you dab off almost all of the paint onto a towel, or in my case, a shop towel, and then you go in with very little paint on your brush. And I like using a chip brush for this because they just don't hold a lot of paint to begin with. I've tried it with other types of brushes and they tend to actually put too much paint on my piece at a time, and I find that a chip brush just doesn't work like that. So it's a lot of layers. This took me 28 minutes, you guys, of dry brushing the Crinoline over the Prairie Grey, but I just kept going and adding a little bit more paint here and a little bit more paint there until I achieved the look that I was going for. Once I finally made myself stop adding the crinoline and was satisfied with how my piece looked, it was time to seal it. And for that, again, I'm using the DIY's clear wax. I am just brushing on a very, very light coat. There's no way I'm going to be able to reach all of the nooks and crannies to wipe it back. So I'm just making sure that my brush isn't heavily loaded when I go in, and I'm working that wax all over in a nice thin coat so that if I don't wipe an area back, it's not got a big, thick, gunky glob of wax stuck somewhere. Once I finished that process and I was happy with the result, I moved on to DIY's dark wax. Now I did thin out my dark wax just a little bit with some mineral spirits, and for that I just dipped my brush into the mineral spirits. I put that onto my styrofoam plate with my dab of the dark wax, and I just pull some of that dark wax into the mineral spirits until I'm happy with the consistency I've got, and then I apply it to my piece. Once I had applied some, I very gingerly wiped it back with my shop towel, trying not to rub too hard. I had really worked this paint a lot, and I didn't want to accidentally rub too hard and remove it from the brown undercoat that I had spray painted on earlier. I can see here I had finished dark waxing quite a bit of this, and it was awfully dark for my taste, so I just grabbed my clear wax brush that still had just a little bit of clear wax on it and went over the entire portion that I'd finished with the dark wax and just lightened that dark wax up a little bit. The beautiful thing about clear wax is it acts kind of like an eraser over the darker waxes, so if you ever get into trouble where you've applied a thick layer or it's just too dark, grab some clear wax and use that brush just like an eraser, and it will remove some of that dark color for you. So you can see here again, I just finished waxing this little mum, and I am wiping back my excess with the shop towel. And then again, I'm going to grab my wax brush with the clear wax on it and just go over that. And it kind of acts a little bit like a highlighter, honestly, just removing some of that darkness from the very front of this piece and lightening that crinoline paint back up a little. Once I'd finally finished with the waxing, this piece is done. And as much as it was kind of an experiment, I really like how it came out. And I hope you guys like it too. Here for today, you guys. I hope you liked my projects and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you think about subscribing to my channel and then just hit that little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know which of the projects in today's video your favorite was. And as a quick reminder, any of the paint products you saw me use today can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I do have more DIY paint on the way. Thanks to you guys and your orders. I appreciate so very much. I actually had to reorder some paint, so that should be here any day now and back in stock on the website as well. For, let's see, Tuesday's video, it is more than likely going to be a thrift haul. At least I hope that we actually find some things when we go out junking on Sunday. And a couple reasons for that. Number one, I really kind of need some things. And number two, It's a lot easier for me to film and edit a thrift haul video than it is the thrift flips. And right now, you guys, I am in the middle of trying to reset the cottage, rearrange a bunch of things, take down Easter, and then we're also getting the nursery all ready for our opening day on the 20th. So a little bit easier format video is what I kind of need right this second. So hopefully, like I said, keep your fingers crossed for me that I actually find some cool things while we're out Sunday that I have to show you on Tuesday. Anyway, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. I hope you've got something fun planned for yourself. And as for me, again, I'm going to be out junking, and then Monday, I'm probably, hopefully, going to do some yard work, weather permitting. We'll see. So that should be fun. And I will see you guys back here on Tuesday. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I'll see you Tuesday. Bye.